The best bang for your buck. That's exactly how I describe Hyundai and Kia's electric vehicles with regards to their DC fast charging capabilities. The eGMP platform and its 800-volt architecture offer some of the fastest electric vehicle charging times of any EVs, and certainly the fastest in their price category. Today we're going to take a look at a full 0 to 100% charging session on a 350 kilowatt EVgo DC fast charger with a 2024 Kia EV9 GT-Line to see exactly how well this vehicle DC fast charges. Let's get into it. Okay, so why do I consider Hyundai and Kia's EVs offering the best bang for your buck as far as DC fast charging times? That's because there are electric vehicles that charge better. The Porsche Taycan, the Lucid Air, but those vehicles cost twice as much as Kia and Hyundai vehicles, even more than twice as much, depending on what trim you get. And in the price category that the Hyundai and Kia vehicles are in, there's really nothing that replenishes the battery as quickly and adds miles back as quickly as the Kia and Hyundai vehicles do. So I took a 24 Kia EV9 GT-Line to a 350 kilowatt EVgo DC fast charger and did a full 0 to 100% charge recording, which we're going to take a look at next in time lapse. I'm then going to pull out all the usual charts and graphs and even a couple new ones to take a look at exactly how well the vehicle charges. We're going to look at the full charging curve. We're going to look at the time to add miles. We're going to see if the EV9 matches Kia's claim of 10 to 80% in 24 minutes. And we'll also analyze how fast or slow the vehicle charges once it hits 80% state of charge. I like to do this with all my vehicles so people really understand that if you don't need that extra range, it's not worth your time to sit at a DC fast charger once the vehicle has hit about 80% state of charge. With that said, let's jump into the time lapse and take a look at exactly how well the EV9 does on a 350 kilowatt DC fast charger. State of Charge is powered by Qmerit. After I've helped you decide which electric vehicle charging equipment you're going to buy, follow the link in the description of my videos and let the EV charging installation professionals at Qmerit install it. After 3.5 minutes, the EV9 is already at 10% state of charge and pulling just under 200 kilowatts. We reached 20% in just under 7 minutes, and now we're pulling exactly 200 kilowatts. 30% state of charge arrives in slightly less than 10 minutes, which is really great. We're at 40% state of charge in just about 13 minutes, and 50% comes in less than 16 minutes of charging. Now I'm going to stop the video here to talk about where we're at. Based on the EPA combined range rating of 270 miles per charge, the EV9 has now added 135 miles of range in just under 16 minutes. Now look at the pack voltage. It's at 610 volts. I don't know if you noticed when we started, but the pack voltage was just around 500 volts. It's now crept up to 610. That max 950 volts you see below the pack voltage is the max voltage that the charger can put out, not what the vehicle can take in. The EV9's max pack voltage is right around 632 volts. So while it's in the classification of an 800 volt battery system, the voltage actually doesn't come close to approaching 800 volts. EVs are generally placed in two categories: 400 volt systems for the lower voltage packs and 800 volt systems for the higher voltage packs. But that doesn't mean their voltage all reaches 800 volts. My Equinox, for instance, is considered a 400 volt battery pack, but the maximum voltage that the pack will reach is about 333 volts, and the minimal is way down under 300. So as you can see, batteries aren't exactly 400 volts and 800 volts. I just wanted to point that out here. Okay, back to the recording. The EV9 hits 60% state of charge after only 19 minutes, and we reach 70% in a brief 23 minutes. That's really good. 0 to 70% in 23 minutes. I'm impressed with that. But by now, the EV9 has begun to slowly lower the power intake, and it's only accepting about 171 kilowatts. I say only. I would take that in a heartbeat on either my Lightning or my Chevrolet Equinox. I'd take 171 kilowatts at 70% state of charge in a heartbeat. Anyway, so it takes 5 more minutes to hit 80% state of charge, and by now I've been charging for only 28 minutes, so 0 to 80% in less than a half an hour. Kia claims the EV9 can charge from 10% to 80% in 24 minutes. It took me about 3.5 minutes to get to 10% from 0. So in this charging session, I charged from 10% to 80% in 24.5 minutes, pretty much proving Kia's claim to be accurate. From here on, I'm going to speed things up even more because with all EVs, the charging rate is going to slow down significantly after around 80% state of charge. It takes 14 minutes to go from 80% state of charge to 90%, and at that point, we're only drawing 40 kilowatt. And then it takes another 19 minutes to go from 90% to 100%. Now, I will note that something weird happened at the very end of this session. The charger was showing that it was delivering no power to the vehicle from 97% state of charge up to 100%, and then just quickly shut off. I believe the vehicle's state of charge calibration was slightly off, and it thought it was at a slightly lower state of charge than what it was, but as all the cells balanced, it realized it was at a higher state of charge, so that's why it shut off. The vehicle did show it was 100% charged when this charging session ended. So we finished up the complete 0 to 100% charging session in just over an hour, but the real story here is how well the EV9 charged up to 80%. Okay, so I think I could almost end the video here because point proven, but I won't. We're going to put it on the charts and graphs because you really get a better understanding of how well or poorly an electric vehicle charges once you can see it on paper. It's one thing to see it in kind of a time lapse there, but once we plot it out on the chart, you really get a better understanding. So let's first take a look at the full charging curve, and from there we'll get into some of the time to charge charts. So you can see here in the beginning, the EV9 took a couple of minutes to climb up over 200 kilowatt. And yes, I did precondition on the way to the charging station, so the battery should have been ready to accept its maximum power right from the get-go. Now look at this beautiful long flat charging curve here. The charging rate increases slightly as the pack voltage increased, and it held over 200 kilowatts until about 60% state of charge. That's what I really love to see, charging curves that just pull all the way up early on and just hold it way out deep into the pack like this did here. Now, we can see this gradual step down from about 53% to 73%, but the EV9 still maintained a pretty high charge rate throughout this. Now, my friend Kyle Connor from Out of Spec Motoring, he owns an EV9, and he looked at this and said that he thinks a little thermal throttling may have happened here at the very end just to lower the charge rate a little bit because he sees his EV9 hold a higher rate a little bit longer before it starts to walk down like this. But even if that happened and the charge curve looked a little more like this, I think it would still probably have only cut my charge time down by about a minute at best if we had the extra power in this area here. So I'm not really concerned with that. And if it did throttle it down a little bit early, it really didn't make much of a difference in this charging session. Now from 75% to 85% is where we take the biggest hit. And the charge rate drops to only 40 kilowatt. And it held that for a while before the final drop to 100% charged. And now let's take a look at what I think are some of the most important charts. A lot of people focus on charging curves and the charging power of electric vehicles as how fast they charge. I really like to think of how fast the vehicle adds driving range is really determines what makes it a good charging electric vehicle. So we're going to take a look at the time to charge charts now. You can see here on the bottom, the x-axis, you'll see charging time in minutes, and on the y-axis, it's the state of charge. We're going to take a look at a couple different metrics based on this chart here. First up, let's take a look at what percentage of the battery gets added in 10-minute segments. After 10 minutes of charging, I added 30% of the battery. We started at 0, we were at 30% state of charge. Very good first 10 minutes. After 20 minutes of charging, we're up to 62% state of charge. That's actually excellent. 30 minutes of charging, we got to 81%. So we charged from 0 to 80% in under a half an hour. That's very good. So at the 40 minutes of charging, we're at 89%. You see that? We only added 8% of the battery from 30 minutes to 40 minutes. And now at 50 minutes, we're at 95% state of charge. So we only added 6% of the battery in that 10-minute segment. And then it took slightly longer than an hour to reach 100%. And now let's go even deeper down the rabbit hole and see how many miles of range we add per minute of charging during this charging session. Okay, first off, you see the columns here. I have one for the EPA range in minutes and one for my 70-mile-an-hour highway range test in minutes. I wasn't able to do a 70-mile-an-hour highway range test on the EV9, so there's no data for that. So we're just going to go off of EPA combined rating right now. It took 6.2 minutes of charging for us to add the first 50 miles of range. It took 11.9 minutes, just under 12 minutes, to add 100 miles of driving range. So that's a good metric there. If you need to add 100 miles of driving range and you're plugging in at a relatively low state of charge with the EV9, you only have to stay there about 12 minutes if you're on a 350 kilowatt DC fast charger. And of course, the battery is conditioned to the right temperature. It took 17.6 minutes to add 150 miles of driving range, 24.6 minutes to add 200 miles. That's great. 25 minutes, you can add 200 miles of driving range. And it took 46.8 minutes to add 250 miles of driving range. Now let's take a look at how many miles of range are added per minute in 10-minute segments of this charging session. So you can see here in the first 10 minutes, we averaged 8.4 miles of range for every minute of charging. That's very good. When you get up close to 10 miles per minute, that's excellent. From the 10-minute mark to the 20-minute mark, we added 8.6, a little bit more because the charging rate increased a little bit as the pack voltage went up. And then you can see here from 20 minutes to 30 minutes, it's starting to ramp down at this point. We're adding 5 miles of range for every minute of charging, which is still okay, but you can see it's starting to tail off. Now take a look at after a half an hour. If you remember, we were at 81% state of charge after 30 minutes. So from the 30 to 40 minute point, we added only 1.8 miles of range for every minute we were there charging. And it gets worse. From 40 minutes to 50 minutes, it was 1.5. So as you can see here, this demonstrates really when you get to that 80% state of charge point, which happened at right around 30 minutes, it just is not worth hanging out at the DC fast charger unless you absolutely need that extra range to get to your final destination. Well, if I haven't lost you by now, I guess you're here for the long haul and you're a charging geek like me. So this next chart is basically the previous chart data, except on a linear graph. You can see on the x-axis, it's the state of charge, and on the y-axis, it's the range replenishing rate, miles per minute, basically. Just what we just went over, except this plots it out on a graph. And you can see here, I have this dotted line here where I say slow is less than 3 miles of range per minute. I don't think you should be sitting at a DC fast charger. It's just a total waste of time. You can see that happens right around at the 80% state of charge point. So this holds true that after 80%, you really shouldn't be continuing to charge on a DC fast charger. You're also taking up a spot that somebody else could be plugging in, but that's a whole nother story. But you can see here, up to 80%, we're well above 3 miles of range added per minute and even approaching the 10 miles of range per minute with the EPA combined range rating. I also added the EPA highway range rating, which is less than the combined EPA range rating because I wasn't able to do my highway range test. So I used that figure here, and that might be a little bit more representative if you're going to be on a long road trip and you're trying to figure out how many miles of range you're going to get back once you stop to charge. So this chart here is very useful on a long road trip. I've had people say that they like to download these charts and put them in their glove box so they have them. I'm going to make them available on my website, evchargingstations.com. It's a new website that I am kicking off now. It's all about EV charging. And I'm going to have all the charts and graphs that I make downloadable there. I don't have them loaded up yet, but I will at some point soon. And anything that you need that you see on my videos, you'll be able to download for there. But for now, if you want something like this, you could just stop the video and take a screenshot of it, and you'll have it as a resource on your road trips. There's one last chart to take a look at here, and this is the first time that I've added this kind of chart to my videos. So let's take a look at that now. And finally, a new chart that I'm introducing here today with the Kia EV9 GT-Line. This is my new master DC fast charging chart that I guarantee you has more granular information than you will find about DC fast charging than anywhere else. So let's take a look at how the chart's laid out. Let's go down to the bottom to the legend area, and you'll see all the way to the left there's 5 different colors that the boxes can be. The light green is when in that period of the charging session the vehicle was accepting 80 to 100% of its peak power. The darker green is between 60 and 79% of peak power. The beige color is 40 to 59%. The orange color is 20 to 39%. And when it's red, it's accepting less than 20% of the peak DC fast charging power that electric vehicle can accept. As you can see, based on the color, you can quickly identify which sections of the charging session you receive the most power. Okay, now let's take a look at the middle of the legend down below where it says the example box. Now I'm using the example box on the graph where it was from 10 to 80%. That's a very popular box that people would want to look at. And you can see here, it took 24 minutes to go from 10% to 80%. We've added 70% of the battery, which equals 70 kilowatt hours because the Kia EV9 has a 100 kilowatt hour battery pack. Typically in these boxes, the added state of charge won't equal the added energy, but it just so happens that EV9 has a 100 kilowatt hour battery, so 20% of the battery is going to be 20 kilowatt hours. And we added 189 miles of EPA rated range. The average charging power on the top right-hand corner of the box was 183 kilowatt hour. That's saying from 10% to 80% of this charging session, the vehicle averaged 183 kilowatt hour of power taken in, which is fantastic and why it's such a good DC fast charging electric vehicle. And then all the way over to the right here where it says popular boxes in dark broken lines, I have 2 boxes highlighted on the graph in these dark broken lines. It's the 10 to 80% section of the charging session and also 20 to 80% because those seem to be the 2 sections of a charging session that people are most interested in. But with this chart here, you get all of the sections. Now let's take a look at the top of the chart here. That's where it shows the starting state of charge and range, assuming the EPA combined range of 270 miles. And on the y-axis, that's the final state of charge and range for that period. So each box you can see from 0% to 10%. Then you can see from 0 to 20, 0 to 30, 0 to 40. And then if you go one column over, you can see how long it took to go from 10 to 20, 10 to 30, 10 to 40. And then one more column over, 20 to 30, 20 to 40, 20 to 50, and all the way down. So you get every single section of the charging session here. So if you're on a road trip, you can pretty much map out exactly where you're starting at and where you need to finish, and you'll see what your average power will be, how long it'll take, how many miles you'll add. Now, of course, this is based on good weather where the battery's warm. When it gets colder, the vehicle doesn't charge as fast, it doesn't go as far. So you're going to have to kind of figure that out yourself. If you're on a road trip, how much less range you're going to get. This is kind of ideal temperature here. But this is an extremely useful graph for people that do frequently road trip and use DC fast chargers, and they want to know how long it's going to take for them to get to a certain endpoint from whatever starting point, because we do 10 to 80%, 20 to 80% charging sessions. But when you're on a road trip, you don't end up at 10% or 20%. You might plug in at 31% or 17%. This graph is really going to help you understand how long it'll take you to get from the starting point you start at to where you want to finish at and how many miles it'll add. So this is definitely one of those graphs that if you're a Kia EV9 owner and frequently road trip, take a screenshot of this or download it when I have that feature available and throw it in the glove box, because this will be extremely useful. And as I said, you can't get this type of granular information anywhere else. This is the only place that you can get such level of detail with regards to your DC fast charging sessions. Okay, so let's summarize. Kia EV9 GT-Line. It's got 100 kilowatt hour battery pack, actually a little bit less, I think it's 99.8 kilowatt hour. Has a maximum DC fast charge rate of 210 kilowatts. In my charge recording here, the first 20 minutes of charging, we averaged adding about 9 miles of range for every minute of charging. We added 150 miles of range in under 18 minutes. And in the 10 to 80% charging session of this full charging session, we averaged over 180 kilowatts of power being delivered to the vehicle. All three of those figures are outstanding. So yeah, the EV9, as with all of the Kia and Hyundai vehicles that employ the eGMP platform, are fantastic charging electric vehicles. It's really one of the reasons why Kia and Hyundai are doing so well in the EV space right now, that eGMP platform. In addition to charging, they just make great electric vehicles. Quite honestly, if the new Kia EV3 was available today, I probably would have gotten it instead of the Chevy Equinox EV that I recently leased. I'm that impressed with Hyundai and Kia vehicles. They really make great electric vehicles, and I think those are two brands we really have to keep an eye on in the coming years. I think they've got some great tech, and they seem to be all in on electric vehicles. They're going to be adding the NACS native ports really soon. Hyundai's got one of their vehicles coming out in about a month with a native NACS port. Kia's got their first vehicle in the first quarter of 2025 is going to have a native NACS port. They're all in on that transition. I think they're going to be one of the first companies to really move all their vehicles from J1772 and CCS1 to the NACS inlet. So yeah, they're very forward thinking, and they're two brands to really keep an eye on. But for now, you know, it's no surprise the EV9 is a fantastic charging DC fast charging electric vehicle for sure, and I think this video absolutely proves it. Listen, if you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comment section below. I try to answer as many as I can, and if this is your first time here at State of Charge, please hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you don't miss any upcoming electric vehicle news and reviews. And as always, thanks for watching.